අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday the 3rd of May 2023. Rebuked. Cabinet spokesperson Dr. Bandula Gunawardena dismisses claims that government planning to use monies in the Employees Provident Fund to restructure domestic debt. Slashed. Litro slashes price of its 12.5 kg domestic gas cylinder by 100 rupees. Laughs maintains prices. Revisions. Electricity tariffs to be revised next month, says Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara. Cabinet approves CEB to adopt new formula to calculate feed-in tariff for renewable energy projects. Common ground. Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says the opposition and the media in common ground to promote democracy.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අතිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. Cabinet spokesperson Dr. Bandula Gunawardena rebuked claims that government is planning to use all funds in the Employees Provident Fund and fixed deposits to restructure local debt. He went on to say that the President instructed the committees appointed to look into the local debt restructuring process to ensure that depositors and fund holders are not inconvenienced in any way. Speaking during today's cabinet media briefing, Dr. Gunawardena also addressed the fate of government employees who are nominated to contest the local government election.
The Cabinet has considered a set of recommendations presented by the Election Commission on steps that need to be taken regarding the government employees nominated as candidates for the local government elections.
දින නියමයක් නොමැතිව මේ පළාත් පාලන ඡන්දය කල් දැමීම නිසා ඡන්ද අපේක්ෂකයන් ලෙස ඉදිරිපත් වූ රාජ්‍ය සේවකයන්ට විශාල අර්බුදයක් ඇති වෙලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ පිළිබඳ මැතිවරණ කොමිසමේ අදහස් දීර්ඝ වශයෙන් විමසලා ඔවුන්ට සහනයක් වශයෙන් තමන් මැතිවරණයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙන කොට්ටාසේම නොවේ නම් වෙනත් ඒ ආසන්න ස්ථානයක සේවය කරන්නටත් ඒ සේවය කිරීමේදී ඔවුන්ට අවශ්‍ය මූලික වැටුප ලබා දෙන්නත් ගරු අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමා ඉදිරිපත් කළ යෝජනාවට කැබිනට් අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
The minister then responded to a question regarding the status of restructuring local debt.
මේ වන විට මොකක්ද මේ දේශීය ණය ප්‍රතිගත කිරීම පිළිබඳව තත්ත්වය අවසන් තීරණයකට එළඹ තිබෙනවාද?
කිසිසේත් අවසන් නිගමනයකට එළඹෙලා නැහැ. විවිධ පාර්ශ්වයන් විවිධ විදියට බිල්ලන් මවාපෑමේ කටයුතු සිද්ධ කරනවා. ස්ථාවර තැන්පත්වල තියෙන සල්ලි ඔක්කොම සීල් කරනවා. ඒවා ගන්නවා. සේවක අර්ථසාධක අරමුදල සම්පූර්ණයෙන් ඉවර කරනවා කියලා. මේවා හුදු කතන්දර. ජනාධිපතිතුමා මේ රටේ තැන්පත්කරුවන්ට අර්ථසාධක අරමුදල් හිමියන්ට අවාසිදායක බලපෑමක් නොවන ආකාරයට උපාය මාර්ගයක ක්‍රමවේද සකස් කර ගැනීම පිළිබඳ ඒ කමිටු වලට වගකීම් බාර දීලා තියෙනවා.
In the meantime, the Cabinet gave its approval to sign a memorandum of understanding between Sri Lanka Customs and the Australian Border Force, establishing cooperation between the two parties regarding customs operations. The objectives of the proposed MOU are to strengthen, promote and enhance cooperation and mutual assistance in custom affairs between the two countries, subject to applicable laws, regulations, procedures and policies of both countries. The relevant draft MOU has received the Attorney General's clearance. Further, the Cabinet gave the approval to enter into a memorandum of understanding on bilateral consultations between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Luxembourg Government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka. The agreement is intended to promote, strengthen and expand bilateral relations, including political, economic, commercial, scientific, technological and cultural sectors between the two countries.
According to Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara, electricity tariffs are to be reviewed and revised in July this year. Accordingly, as per the minister's statement, electricity tariffs will be revised in line with the government policy and cabinet decisions which were made in 2022 with a view of implementing a lost reflective pricing mechanism. The minister further stated that according to the cabinet decision, electricity rates are to be reviewed and revised biannually in the months of January and July every year. In the meantime, the minister stated that the cabinet granted approval for the CEB to adopt a new formula to calculate the feed-in tariff for renewable energy projects to encourage more investments to the sector. He added that the formula will be variable over 20 years and front-loading the first 10 years, taking into account the average weighted prime lending rate, Treasury bill rate, exchange rate and inflation. An investment premium of up to 3% is made available for selected projects. The minister added that developers will have the option of choosing the variable feed-in tariff formula or the fixed tariff formula that was introduced last year, and that the new formula will only be available for new power purchasing agreements. State supplier Gas Lanka Limited announced price reductions with effect from midnight today. Accordingly, prices of its 2.3, 23.5 and 12.5 kilogram cylinders will be reduced by 19, 40 and 100 rupees respectively. In the meantime, privately owned Gas also stated that the prices of its products remain unchanged despite the price hike in the global market.
State LPG supplier Gas Lanka Limited announced that the price of its 12.5 kilogram domestic gas cylinder will be reduced by 100 rupees. According to Litro chairman Mudita Piris, the new price of a 12.5 kilogram cylinder will be 3,638 rupees. The price of its 5 kilogram cylinder will be slashed by 40 rupees to 1,462 rupees. The price of a 2.3 kilogram Litro gas cylinder will be reduced by 19 rupees to 681 rupees. Meanwhile, Gas, the other leading LP gas supplier in the country, says the prices of its products remain unchanged despite the price hike in the global market. Issuing a statement, the company said the prices of LP gas went up in the global market due to several factors including the rise in demand for energy, supply chain disruptions and geopolitical tensions. The statement further read that Gas remains committed in providing their customers with safe, reliable and high-quality LP gas at reasonable prices despite the challenges faced. The company also assured that they will continue to monitor the global market situation closely and adjust their prices accordingly in the future.
The Presidential Secretariat has organized 54 institutions which provide investor facilitation services under 7 task forces in order to create a business-friendly environment in the country.
The President's Media Division announced today that under the directives of President Ranil Wickremesinghe, 54 institutions that provide investor facilitation services under 7 task forces have been organized by the Presidential Secretariat. The President's office stated that these task forces were organized with a view of creating a business-friendly environment in the country. According to the PMD, the aim of this initiative is to simplify the process involved with registering a business, reducing the time taken and making information readily available to increase efficiency. The first review was held on the task force on registering a business, with focuses on legal reforms and operational improvements to facilitate business entry at the Register of Companies. Meanwhile, the second review focused on the Registering Property Task Force that aims to improve the steps involved in land registration, required certificates and related payments. The PMD went on to state that this task force, which comprises 7 institutions, including the Surveyor General's Department, Colombo Municipal Council, Western Province Revenue Department and Information and Communication Technology Agency, will concentrate on improving the Colombo area. Accordingly, the task force is committed to implementing the e-land system to minimize the time, cost and procedures involved in dealing with title searches, registering e-deeds and obtaining buildings or street line certificates. Furthermore, the task force is also focused on delivering outputs such as an online system for title search at the Colombo Land Registry, an automated stamp duty calculation system at the Western Province Revenue Department, and an automated system for deed registration at the Colombo Land Registry by the end of 2023. The PMD noted that the Ministry of Technology will simultaneously address the inter-agency connectivity and digitalization issues to facilitate the task force in meeting its targets.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa, speaking at a forum today, stated that media personnel and the opposition have a common ground where joint action could be initiated for the purpose of promoting and making democracy victorious. Meanwhile, chairman of the Yuthukama organization, Govinda Kumaratunga, stated that reconsideration of the anti-terrorism bill is a victory for the country more than a victory for the opposition.
To put it in summary form, in a very succinct manner, we in the opposition have our own ideologies, vision, roadmaps that we believe in. However, there are issues of great national importance and significance where we have common ground on which we are able to come together. For example, the disastrous consequences of the inept, incompetent government action as far as the Express Pearl debacle is concerned. Also with reference to the anti-terrorism legislation envisaged by the present administration as a replacement for the Prevention of Terrorism Act. From the looks of it, the replacement looks to be more draconian than the existing one. And also the attempt to establish various media authorities to promote control of the free media, to engage on programs of media control and censorship. These are some of the areas that we agree, especially we have a common ground on which we could initiate joint action with a specific purpose of championing and promoting and making democracy victorious.
එන සතියේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව රැස් වෙනකොට එක්ස්ප්‍රස් පර්ල් නෞකාව පිළිබඳ තත්ත්වය. දැන් මම හිතනවා මේක මහා පරිමාණයේ වර්ෂාවක්. මහා බැංකුව කැඩීම ගැන කතා කරා. ඊට නොදෙවනි. මේකෙන් අපේ රටට පුළුවන් වන්දි හැටියට ලබා ගන්න US ඩොලර් බිලියන 6.4ක්. ඒ කියන්නේ IMF එකෙන් ලැබෙන මුදල වගේ දෙගුණයක්. ඊටත් වැඩි. ඊට වඩා මොකක් හරි ඕකේ තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් මොකක්ද කියලා සෙවීම අත්‍යවශ්‍යයි.
ප්‍රතිත්‍රස්ත පනත සම්බන්ධයෙන් පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුලත් ඒ වගේම ඔබතුමන්ලා විශේෂයෙන්ම රටේ මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් කුඩනගු මතය තුලත් අද රජයේ පනත නැවත සලකා බැලීමකට යොමු කරන තැනට යොමු වීම මම හිතන විදිහට ඒක අපි විපක්ෂයේ ජයග්‍රහණයක් හැටියට නෙවෙයි රටේ ජයග්‍රහණයක් හැටියට.
We'll be back after a short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන් කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ටීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ටීමෝ වෙතින්. මේ අලුත් අවුරුද්දේ හිත පිරෙන ගනුදෙනුවකට හොඳම තැන හිත ගිය තැන බැංකුව HNB.
Welcome back in more news. President Ranil Wickremesinghe has instructed to mobilize the dengue task force in a bid to control the spread of dengue in the Western Province. According to the President's office, the head of state has passed the instructions to the Governor of the Western Province, Chief Secretary and the District Secretary to mobilize the dengue task force with the support of relevant institutions and the public. Earlier today, the Sri Lanka Medical Association warned that over 30,000 dengue cases have been reported over the last 4 months of 2023 and that almost 50% of these cases were reported from the Colombo and Gampaha districts of the Western Province. The SLMA further mentioned that concerns in this regard have been raised with the Kalutara and Batiklo districts as well. Speaking on the recent surge in the number of dengue patients being reported, Assistant Secretary of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Dr. Lahiru Kodituaku, raised concerns that an epidemic could break out if the situation is not controlled or contained properly, as the number of cases are only going to increase owing to the inclement weather. The Cabinet has approved the resolution put forward by President Ranil Wickremesinghe to revise the existing maximum limit for the issuance of Treasury bills. Accordingly, as per the Cabinet decision, a proposal in this regard is to be tabled at the Parliament to raise the limit on issuance of Treasury bills.
The Cabinet of Ministers approved the resolution furnished by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in his office as the Minister of Finance, Economic Stabilisation and National Policies to raise the limit of issuance of Treasury Bills up to 6,000 billion rupees, as well as to table a proposal to the Parliament for the purpose. The limit approved by the Parliament on the issuance of Treasury Bills in November 2022 is 5,000 billion rupees. Meanwhile, the total balance of Treasury Bills to be paid at the end of March 2023 is 4,636 billion rupees. The Parliament granted approval for a gross borrowing limit of 4,979 billion rupees for the year 2023. It has been estimated that 3,526 billion rupees and 1,453 billion rupees must be obtained from domestic and foreign sources respectively. Domestic borrowings are mainly secured by the government through issuance of Treasury Bills and Treasury Bonds.
The Colombo Bourse ended higher today, snapping a losing streak of 11 straight sessions helped by financial and industrial stocks. The benchmark all-share index settled 1.2% higher to 8,799.91 points. Expo Lanka Holdings and LOLC Finance were the top gainers on the index, rising 3.5% and 3.9% respectively. Meanwhile, the more liquid S&P SL20 settled at 2,534.3 points, down 0.78%. Market turnover today fell to 617 million rupees from 983.9 million rupees in the previous session. Capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the sector index gained 0.75%. Foreign investors were meanwhile net sellers, offloading 99.6 million rupees worth of stocks, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares amounting to 585.9 million rupees. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Global oil markets continued its straight session of losses today, plunging by 5% ahead of the Federal Reserve's policy decision. Oil output from the OPEC countries is set to fall this month after another voluntary set of cuts were announced last month.
Oil prices extended losses today after plunging 5% in the previous session, as investors fretted about the health of the US economy ahead of an expected Federal Reserve interest rate hike later in the day. Brent futures fell $1.07 to $74.25 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude fell $1.15 to $70.51. Both benchmarks closed at their lowest since late March in the previous session, when they also recorded their biggest one-day percentage declines since early January. Regulators seized First Republic Bank and sold most of its assets to JP Morgan Chase & Co. on Monday, in a deal to resolve the largest US bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis and draw a line under lingering banking turmoil. Energy prices are also under pressure after data from China over the weekend showed manufacturing activity fell unexpectedly in April. According to market sources, citing American Petroleum Institute figures yesterday, US crude stockpiles fell for a third week in a row for the first time since December, down some 3.9 million barrels last week. OPEC oil output is set to drop further in May as a new round of voluntary cuts unveiled on the 2nd of April takes effect. Morgan Stanley meanwhile lowered its forecast for Brent prices to $75 a barrel by year-end.
US stock futures rose today in fragile markets with traders on tenterhooks ahead of the Federal Reserve's latest policy decision. Asia Pacific markets meanwhile largely fell today with Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index leading losses in the region.
The Pan-European Stock 600 index was up almost 0.5% after yesterday's sharp sell-off. S&P 500 futures edged up by 0.1%, but the mood was cautious, with banks in the crosshairs. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Industrial Average futures climbed by 0.1%, and Nasdaq 100 futures also rose by 0.25%. Yields on 2-month US Treasury bills jumped on rising concerns that the US Treasury Department could hit its debt limit earlier than anticipated. The Fed is scheduled to release its latest policy announcement at 2 p.m. in Eastern Time or 11:30 p.m. in local time. Chair Jerome Powell is also set to hold a news conference at 2:30 p.m. in Eastern Time. Meanwhile, the Asian Pacific markets largely fell today as investors look ahead to the US Federal Reserve's policy decision overnight. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led losses in the region and tumbled 1.34% in its final hour of trade, led by energy, industrial and healthcare stocks, while the Hang Seng Tech Index slid 1.88%. In Australia, the S&P ASX 200 fell by 0.96%, while South Korea's Kospi dropped 0.91%. The Kosdaq meanwhile saw a larger loss, falling by 1.45%. Markets in Japan and mainland China closed today for a holiday.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.